What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some initial details about Star Wars Zero Company, an upcoming tactical game set in, of course, the Star Wars franchise that should be releasing sometime in 2026. Now, after a couple of leaks, this game itself was announced back on, I want to say it was actually April 22nd. And as a guy who plays a lot of tactical games, it is naturally of interest to me, and I also like Star Wars to boot. But the thing about April 22nd is that is also when the Oblivion remaster dropped, so I obviously had to cover that, and that was much more important to me, frankly. And so knowing I couldn't get to this for a little while, I decided to save it for today, May the 4th, or essentially just Star Wars Day at this point. Details from this initial announcement are simultaneously good enough to, I think, give you a clear picture of what they're aiming for, while at the same time not really being deep enough to go in for a full systems deep dive. With that in mind, this game is being developed by BitReactor. And the reason I mention that is that some of the people who worked at Firaxis, whose work includes the XCOM series, wound up at BitReactor, so they've clearly got some experience with this exact sort of thing. That said, Zero Company takes place during the Clone Wars, specifically more towards the back half of it, and we are going to be playing as a specific character known as Hawks. Now, the catch there is, though, who Hawks is largely up to you. Outside of their background as an ex-Republic officer, specifically a captain, I believe, the rest of it's pretty much up to you in terms of, what species or alien race you might like to hail from, though they don't exactly give us a lot of detail there, simply stating that this will be an option for people. So there will be different races available to you to customize Hawk as, including appearance and their loadout, that type of typical stuff. Now, Hawks here is going to be assembling a team with a very particular set of skills to combat an emerging threat. Now, currently, they're being a little cagey about what that sort of underground threat actually is, only that it's significant enough to warrant attention from people more suited to espionage, sabotage, that kind of thing. Now, where it gets a little more interesting from there, though, is that it looks like they're planning to use a healthy mix of set-in-stone characters alongside recruitable characters. And we'll talk more about the dedicated cast here momentarily, but on the recruitable side of things, you'll also be able to fully customize these people as well, and it can include anything from astromechs to Jedi. Now, on one hand, I appreciate that they're letting you sort of build out a team here that you can sort of freely customize, or at least whatever the bounds of this system wind up being, allows you to customize that team to your liking, including staples of the genre, of course, but as a ex-Republic officer, I have to assume from everything I've seen here that there won't probably be any sort of Sith representation on your team, which I don't think is a bad thing, just an observation really. But otherwise, you'll get to recruit, customize these recruits, and each of them can, of course, come with their own unique benefits and drawbacks, such as perks and the like, which are things you'll have to take into account when you bring them into the fold. Now, on the set character side of things, I thought this was especially interesting because they specifically combined a cast of characters that is going to have some internal conflict pretty much immediately. Now, from the roleplay side of things, that's almost certainly done intentionally, so you can play out those interactions. And I just wanted to mention that because sometimes I see people talk about how, unlikely groups of companions would never work together because of one situation or another, but I think that kind of thinking overlooks the fact that bringing those two conflicting parties together gives you a ripe background to form a proper story and roleplay the outcome of. But there's also another reason I'm giving that system so much emphasis, and that is because apparently bonds and your relationship with these characters will play an important role in the story. In fact, there was one interview they gave following the announcement that's kind of sort of implied that the ultimate fate of these individual set characters may very well depend on how much your relationship or bond with them has progressed throughout the game, hinting at potentially multiple endings, but obviously too early to say. The other side of that, and perhaps the more tactically relevant one, is that the more these characters interact with each other and increase their bonds, you'll be able to utilize that in combat in the form of powerful abilities they'll get called synergy skills or something of that nature. Now, as far as the characters themselves go, we know at least a few of them. I don't know if there's going to be more or not, but so far they have revealed the Trick, which it must be said is a deeply unfortunate name, but nonetheless, Trick is essentially a rogue clone, clearly dealing with some PTSD from the horrors of the wars they have experienced, but basically your standard clone soldier. We also have Luco, who appears to be an Umbaran sniper, which is interesting because they are not exactly on the best of terms with the Republic and our character as well as an ex-Republic officer. But we've also got Cly, a Mandalorian from a mostly dead clan, and then finally Tell, a Jedi Padawan looking to avenge their master who has since fallen, and Tell's goal is to complete the mission that they had been assigned. So just straight away there you can see some potential for some conflicting points of view and the like, and I think that's probably what they're going for, as their initial announcement talked quite a bit about how they want to push a decent narrative here that you would expect from a Star Wars title. And I'll say at the very least, the setup and the basic plot points are kind of clearly laid out here, and we can see the stepping stones for some of the conflicts and potential resolutions, though obviously how that plays out in game, and whether or not it's handled well will ultimately determine how well that is received, at least in my opinion. But we're not done yet, because we've also got a little bit of word on the Den, which will ultimately act as our base of operations. No word on whether or not it's upgradable, but they did promise a fairly expansive galactic map, and even that we will be visiting relatively uncommon places to go, at least in comparison to the more traditional places. For instance, they didn't mention Tatooine at all, which is probably a good sign. And that in order to travel where we need to go, they're going to be introducing, of course, a new ship and new design, which seems to be the standard for these types of things these days. And it will also come with its own droid pilot to top it all off. Now, I would say at the moment, that's pretty much everything there is to know currently about Zero Company, as the game is still a fair ways off, with, as a reminder, a sort of release window of 2026 sometime. Now, what we obviously don't know then is all about, how the combat works. We see some of that in the trailer that has been in the background of this video, to be sure. But outside of just some generalities of the Star Wars universe, there isn't anything specifically noteworthy there. In fact, it looks like they've even peeled off some of the UI elements as to obfuscate something. As an example, from what they show here, we can't even exactly see what sort of tactical type of system it's using in terms of how it handles its turns or turn-based system overall. But I imagine as the actual release date eventually creeps up on us, we will be certain to learn more about pretty much anything that wasn't mentioned here. But as of right now, it mostly sounds like it has the potential to be promising. I think a good Star Wars TRPG would be a nice way to go. But for now, that's pretty much going to do it. Certainly hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.